Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our MVLS Third Thursday webinar. And the subject of today's webinar, as you can see on the screen there, is taking the leap into pro bono. So what we wanted to do today is just take some time to talk about starting to do pro bono work and how that kind of works, how to get started. You know, as a staff member at MVLS, we hear a lot about, you know, folks who are interested in volunteering, but they don't really know where to start. They feel like they're not prepared. So what we wanted to do was get some volunteers, some of our MVLS CAN members here with us today to share their experiences and just talk about how they got started. So it can give anyone who's interested an idea of how to go about doing that. Today we have with us Chris Moran, Hong Lee, and Yoshika Watford is, I believe, trying to get on. There's some technical difficulties there, so hopefully she'll be able to join us in a moment. But we'll get started and she can jump in hopefully whenever she can. Hold on just a moment. Okay, all right, so let's get started. First, I just want to give all of our panelists a moment to introduce themselves and talk about their experience. So I'm going to start with Chris, and if each of you could just talk a little bit about how you got started in law, what you're doing now, and how pro bono kind of fits into all of that for you. Chris?
Hi. So I got started in law because there were lawyers in my family, and I thought this would be, you know, going to law school and being a lawyer was something I was really interested in from when I was younger. Since I've been practicing since 2015 when I graduated, and most of my day-to-day work is mostly in the tax practice. I worked at a small firm in Towson. I now work with Venable in their Baltimore and sometimes DC offices. So most of my work is tax work with nonprofit organizations and some individuals with respect to charitable planning, and coincidentally, most of my work with, or not coincidentally, most of my work with the MVLS has been with the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. When I was in law school, I volunteered in the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Washington University in St. Louis, and I really was interested in that type of work. It really gave me an opportunity to, you know, to help people out who, you know, had needs they couldn't address themselves. So I've been involved with the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic for about 3 years. I've also done some expungements with MVLS, and you know, I've done the other pro bono work I've done through Venable's connections with the ABA or the NAACP. I've had the opportunity to be involved in filing a couple amicus briefs in the Supreme Court and state Supreme Courts, and I'm also have been involved with some immigration matters. I'm currently representing an asylum applicant.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's sounds like you've had a really interesting breadth of pro bono experience. That's great. Hong, how about you? Tell us your story.
Okay, well, it's been a while since someone asked me how I got into law, so I probably took a path that is not too dissimilar from people, and maybe similar to others, where I had went to the University of Maryland, you know, did the 4-year thing, worked for 2 years, kind of in a field that I had graduated with, and decided I needed to go back to school, and law school seemed like a good opportunity for me to, I guess, advance my career. And it seemed interesting to me because I think everybody deep down likes to help other people. So being able to be analytical and use my reasoning and all that kind of stuff seemed like a good fit. And so that was, oh my God, that was like 10 years since I graduated. That was 2005 when I started law school. And then afterwards, I clerked for a year in the city for Judge Murdoch, and then joined a small boutique firm in Columbia doing property law work, HOA condos specifically. And for the last 4 years, I've been a solo practitioner in Baltimore City, practicing in HOA condo work, but generally property law matters along with domestic work and some civil litigation. And so I got involved with MVLS. Back when I started my practice, I knew a staff attorney who was working there, and she introduced me to a lot of the other attorneys and staff there, and I got a good feeling from everybody. And I think with most pro bono entities, everybody really, deep down, they're just trying to help other people. And because we're all lawyers, we do it in the fashion that we were trained to do, which is through legal representation and helping people with their legal issues. And so I found MVLS as a way to not only get the benefit of helping people out and that good feeling you get from doing that, but also integrating into my practice, whereas I could take a lot of cases in some unfamiliar terrain and get more experience that way and build my client base that way. And it's been a very important part of my practice that I've been able to do and flourish in. So I take a lot of different cases. I try and take cases that are a little outside what I generally do. So, for example, I don't do a lot of landlord-tenant stuff, so I like taking some landlord-tenant cases when they pop up, and just some other things, maybe deed conveyances, which I normally do, but it's helpful for people, and then just general domestic cases. So it's been a good time working with MVLS.
Great, thanks, Lon. And I guess I'll share a little bit of background on me since I'm going to be participating too. Yoshika, is that you?
Yeah, and I'm here, yes.
Oh, wonderful. You're just in time. So Yoshika, we just had Hong and Christopher kind of give a little bit of background on how they got started in the law, what they're doing now, and how pro bono fits into that. So do you want to share your story?
Sure. Well, I've always kind of had going to law school in the back of my mind as a possibility. And in undergrad, I double majored in communications and philosophy. There's not a lot you can do with the philosophy degree besides go to law school. But, it really did wind up helping me out when I did go. But after undergrad, I actually worked for a couple of years for a mental health agency. And I really got a chance to see how very many different ways that people need help and are treated unfairly and really don't know their rights and have no idea how to stand up for themselves and how to fight for themselves. And it's something that I wanted to be able to do. And while working with the organization I worked for, I was able to help, a few people. I wanted to be able to help a lot more people and on a larger scale and in, various ways. So I went to law school. And in law school, I did a lot of externships with legal aid and ACLU, and I worked with our civil litigation clinic. And that's when I realized pretty much everything I like to do and I'm interested in pays nothing, but I'm okay with that. It does. The first thing I got involved with pro bono was the unaccompanied minors and, representing them and trying to, advise them. And that can be emotionally difficult, but also it is beyond rewarding. Just to know that, you've given somebody some hope, that you, listen. A lot of times these kids and, their caretakers are lost. They have no idea what's going to happen. And being able to at least, give them the information that they need, you do feel like you've made a difference. I've also done some divorce cases, and I'm currently working on a custody case through MVLS. I had 2 expungements, but those 2 cases were disappointing because I was only able to communicate with one of those clients once, and then he just kind of fell off the face of the earth. And the other never contacted me, and I was never able to get in contact with him. And that was disappointing and also was surprising to me. I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, well, and that's definitely an issue that we're going to talk about in more detail a little bit later is, what to expect, when you're working with a pro bono client. But that's great. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your story. I'm going to just share a little bit about myself since I'm going to be contributing to the conversation as well as a staff member. So I was a music major in undergrad, actually. Music business, if you believe that's a major, it is. And I also had a few years after undergrad that I was working before I decided to go back to school, to go to law school. And at the time, my older brother was in law school, and so the more we talked about what he was doing and what the classes were like and what kind of internships and things like that he was doing, the more I became interested in it. So after 3 years of being out of college, I decided to go back to law school. And so it's been everything I hoped it would be. And after I graduated from law school, I think that was 2012 when I graduated. I clerked for Charles Peters in the Circuit Court for Baltimore City. And then for a year before I joined MVLS, I was working at a firm in Greenbelt doing estates and trusts work, so estate administration and estate planning and trusts, that sort of thing. And I enjoyed that work, but as soon as I saw the opening with MVLS, I wanted to take it because I had done some work with pro bono and legal service organizations in law school, and those were really the experiences that stood out to me as being fulfilling. So I made that change almost 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back. Okay, so let's start on the first couple of topics that we have planned for today. The first thing that I want to kind of talk about is beginning the pro bono journey and like what types of things to consider when you're thinking about starting to do pro bono work. So I've just listed a couple of things here. So for me, and when I talk to potential volunteers, a lot of times it's thinking about the time involved in the case, the area of law, and whether it's short-term versus long-term representation. And so I know for each of you, can you talk a little bit about how you go about deciding what kind of pro bono to do and what types of cases, and why or why not you would choose something outside of your practice area?
Okay, well, for me, my first thing is to make sure that it's the type of case that I know that I'll have enough time to put into it. Like I try to kind of figure out how much time it'll need and then add, probably 25% more, because we never know what's going to happen. And if I know with everything else I have going on, I won't be able to dedicate that much time, then I know I need to pass on that case. But if I know that I can, that I do have the time and that I will be able to, put enough time into the case, that's usually one of the top things that I'll, one of my top criteria, just making sure that I'll have the time to dedicate to the case. Other than that, it's usually, if it's a new area of law, if it's something that I'm interested in, I like to do that because I like to learn something new. And if I can help somebody while I learn something new, that's even better for me. But I take more cases that with things that I'm familiar with, simply because they're a little faster. So I feel like I can, get through them faster and be able to help somebody else.
Cool. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I think some considerations are similar to what Yoshika voiced. I try to determine, when I'll have time and what sort of time I'll have, but, as an associate in a large law firm, that's, somewhat of a fool's errand because, my schedule can change day to day based on what people are telling me to do. But I do know, most of my work is with the low-income taxpayer clinic, and I can usually tell how much time a case is going to take. Sometimes it's very brief. The person just needs, someone to advocate with them, before the IRS. And, something's gone wrong, and it's oftentimes some of these cases can be resolved with, a phone call to the IRS, and that will solve things. And so I've also
go ahead.
Some of the work I've done outside of my practice, outside of tax law, I just look for different experiences that I don't get in my day-to-day practice. Like I don't ever appear in court, but I have taken, I'm taking an immigration case, and that will involve court appearances and the more advocacy-focused work, as opposed to analysis and writing that my day-to-day practice involves.
So, Chris, one of the things that you said was, sometimes you can kind of estimate how long you think a case is going to take. Is that something that you look at before, that you can tell from like the case descriptions, or, for MVLS, we do case descriptions and our paralegals reach out to volunteers. Is that something that you try and figure out from the initial information, or do you figure that out after you've accepted a case? Like how does that kind of process work for you?
The initial information is often very helpful. So I typically use that. The initial information usually, I can usually spot the issues that will come up. I mean, it's not, once I see the whole case file, then I get a better picture, but the initial information is often very helpful.
Yeah. And Hong, how about you? You've taken family law and property cases. How do you determine what you have time for, especially with family cases, which can sometimes take much longer than anticipated?
With Yoshika's comment, it's very important, because you pretty much have to add 25% more, or even more than that, time with respect to family law cases, because I think a typical family law practitioner will know as soon as they enter their appearance in the case, they're pretty much in that case unless they withdraw or take some action to make sure their client understands that they're no longer representing them after the fact, because you get into a custody case, it can be back for a status conference in 6 months. And so, you really have to be very mindful of what you accept and what you have the time to do. So the paralegals at MVLS are actually very, very helpful. And so when I look for cases, I'll either look on the website or scroll through the emails of available cases. But usually what I'll do is I'll just contact a paralegal directly and say, hey, I've got this much time to take on this type of case. Either it be, a long-term case that is going to take a couple of months or a year to resolve, or something where I can just, be done with it within a couple of hours. And so then the paralegals will look at their caseload and then just kind of shoot me back a couple of responses, and then I get a better idea of what's available and what kind of fits my schedule. So and I think Yoshika can attest to this, as a solo practitioner, you really have to be mindful of what you take on, because of the other stuff that you have to do. And so you have a good idea of what's on the calendar and what's ahead of you. And so that's what I try and do. I try and use the paralegals as a really good resource to give me more information on the case, and whether or not I can finish. Is this something that is going to take me a couple of days to figure out and get resolved, or am I going to be stuck in it for a little while? So I should just kind of plan accordingly. And the other thing that I do too is I am a little conservative when I take on cases. So I'll kind of take on a case knowing that, okay, maybe I can take one or two more, but after I get into it and I meet with the client and we have that first consult, then and I have a better idea of what to expect, then I know, okay, I should hold off on taking 1 or 2 more cases. Let me focus on this, do what I need to do, and then see if I can take anything else on more.
Yeah, that actually sounds a lot like what I do. So in addition to all of the things that I do at MVLS with the, running different programs, I also have clients that I take on for representation. So I usually have at any given time a few foreclosure and tax sale clients, and I tend to wait until I'm almost done with a case to take on another one, just because, I also have to manage my time between individual clients and also, and working on all of our programs at large. So that's a really good point. Just a couple of other things I wanted to share with everyone. So I have some stats on the average time spent depending on case type. So as you all could probably guess, the longest cases tend to be divorce, custody, and actually tax. I was a little surprised by that. The average, and keep in mind with these average hours spent, this includes the really extreme cases that take a lot of time over a long period of time, and then it also includes cases where you're just sitting down and giving someone advice. So the average hours for divorce and custody and tax cases is between 20 and 25 hours. So and what I try and remember with these cases is that the goal for pro bono attorneys in Maryland every year is 50 hours. So, one of those cases could knock out half of that for you. And that's over a longer period of time too. So it is a lot of hours, but the length of case time is usually much longer with those cases. Kind of moderate amount of time for different cases. We have at about approximately 15 hours average is name change. I was a little surprised on that one. Foreclosure and tax sale, adoption and guardianship, and some certain types of collections cases. Now, in my experience, it's really rare that I spend that 10 hours on foreclosure cases. And collections cases, most of the time, for me, it's 5 hours or under, because they're district court cases. They're very fast, and many times we're able to settle them, so it doesn't usually involve going to court. So for me, those cases are usually, no more than 5 hours. The lowest, the shortest amount of time invested in cases are usually for expungements. And it sounds like all three of you have done expungements, so you can confirm or deny this, but generally the average for expungements is about 3 hours. So if someone's new to pro bono, expungement can be a great way to get started if you don't feel like you have a lot of time. And then actually bankruptcy is fairly low as well. The average is around 10 hours, because we only do Chapter 7 bankruptcies, and those tend to last 6 to 9 months. Okay, so next topic, and we kind of got into this a little bit, but balancing pro bono in your practice. So what are your tips on managing and maintaining balance in your regular practice with your pro bono work? Hong, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm being a solo practitioner. I'm kind of in charge of bringing in the cases and then working them. So I know that if I'm not getting paid, I'm not getting paid. So I obviously I want to make sure that I'm maintaining my practice and not letting, I want to do pro bono, and I do pro bono, but I can't let the pro bono, eat into what I need to do to meet my overhead and the other things that need to be taken care of on a monthly basis. So once I've prioritized that, I kind of just look at my overall calendar and my caseload and see what I can fit in and see what I can do. And if I can get in a couple of deed conveyances or an expungement or something like that, where I'm taking on at least one type of pro bono case, and it's not that time consuming because I've got other stuff I got to deal with, then I feel like that's a win. And in the meantime, if things slow up and I can take something else that's going to be a long-term thing and doesn't necessarily need a lot of upfront work, but is going to take some time to develop, then I'll take on one of those cases and work it in the schedule, and not try and do too much. I always find that if I try and do too much, it isn't a good recipe for success. So I look to see what I can do and what I can manage, and do it in a way that doesn't stress me out or make me feel like I'm taking on too much. Because the last thing I want to do is feel stressed out, because then that gets passed on to my clients, whether or not they're paying or not paying, and that's not a good recipe for success.
Right. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, so I try to look at whether, things that, if something needs immediate action, then I try to see how long it's going to take. Like, even if I'm relatively busy, if there's something that needs immediate action, but I know it's only going to take a couple hours, then I can take it on. And then, I also look at, some cases will take a little longer, but it's going to be spread out. Like, the time's going to be spread out over a period of time. So you might have a little work, but then you might be sitting, you might not have anything to do for a while. So I try to get a little bit of a sense of what, how soon things need to be done. And then, I also try to set realistic expectations with the client, and try to give myself, like Hong and Yoshika were saying, I try to give, when I talk to the client about a timeline, try to give myself more time than I need, because, to a large extent, working at being an associate or a more junior level attorney at a bigger firm, I don't have a whole ton of control over my schedule. If someone comes to me and says, Chris, I need this tomorrow, well, I have to do that by then.
That's an interesting point that you bring up about setting expectations. A lot of the clients that come to MVLS for help have never had an attorney represent them for a civil matter. They may have had a touch with the criminal justice system, and they may not. So this may be a totally new experience for them too. I agree. Setting expectations and talking about how the representation is going to work can really help to minimize problems and communication problems. Yoshika, have you found that holds true for you?
Absolutely. One of the very first things that clients, pro bono or otherwise, ask me is, how long is this going to take? When will this be resolved? Is it going to take, 2 years, or is it going to, can you have this done next week? And, so you do really need to sit down and explain to them, the timeline, how everything goes, and give them realistic expectations. Because otherwise you'll have a client calling you every day, is it done? Are you finished yet? Is it done? And you don't want them constantly disappointed either. When you could have told them, this is going to take, right, it does. It absolutely does. And so that is very important. And for me, organization and time management are key. Absolutely. I have to schedule my time to spend on everything I'm doing, or, it kind of gets jumbled up. And kind of like Hong said, I will want to take on more cases than I should. So I have to remind myself, to only take on 1 or 2 cases at a time, so that I can focus on them and give them, the kind of attention they deserve. And then I'll be able, better able to help other people. Because it is something when you see there, so many clients need help, like, well, I can take all 3 of these. But then it's like, okay, well, I don't have 10 hours tomorrow to spend, going through these things or doing it. So it's, you kind of learn with, that you have to be totally organized to keep up with everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think usually, like for me, when I take on a client, I try and schedule the first meeting, and I usually try and allocate a little more time than usual for that, because I tell them to bring in all of their documents, just bring everything that's relevant, and then I'll go through and I also try and educate them in that first meeting about the situation generally, so that they have context for what's happening to them. And I think that has helped a lot in having in kind of setting realistic expectations for clients, especially since a lot of times it is their first time being represented by an attorney. So that has been really useful, because then if they understand the situation generally that they're in, I think it's a little bit easier to kind of work on solutions for them. Okay, great. So let's go to this. So this slide, this topic is really what I like to talk about is just sharing your best experiences, some challenging experiences, and what you learned from that. So my first question is, what do you wish you had known before accepting your first pro bono case? Chris, do you want to start with that?
I think one thing I've learned through experience, and that maybe I wish I'd known right away, is that communication with your pro bono clients can be difficult. A lot of them don't have regular access to a computer, or they're not particularly comfortable with using email. They might have a cell phone plan with limited minutes, so there's sometimes where you won't be able to contact them. So that I think that can be difficult, and you kind of have to manage for that. So I've had times where that is, especially initially, where I was a little confused about how I was supposed to work with the client. But and then another thing that can be kind of difficult is client expectations might be unrealistic. And then especially with the tax cases, a lot of times there's a lot of financial disclosure you'll need, and that can be challenging, just because people who are in a situation where they have a tax debt might, there's often something else going on, and their finances might not be nearly as organized as they would like, but you still need all that information to go forward and to communicate with the IRS or the state of Maryland.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about Yoshika? What about you? What do you wish you had known?
I definitely wish I had known that, communicating and keeping in touch with your clients can be difficult for the same reasons he gave. A lot of them don't necessarily own a cell phone. They might not have computers at home or internet access on a regular basis. So even if they, really want to keep in touch with you, a lot of times, it's difficult for them, and you have to, make sure that they know how to get in touch with you. And so if they send you an email, if they send you, if they leave a voicemail or something, that, you can actually at least have what they need and, hopefully be able to, respond to them, or they have another number where you can reach them at a certain time. Try to schedule time that they will have access to internet or access to a phone. And, a lot of times that's what you have to do. If they know that the only time they'll be able to use the internet is between 2 and 4 on Thursday, then, I just try to make sure I'm available to at least email back and forth, with whatever we need to talk about. If that's the only thing, that's the only time they're available. Because I do understand that a lot of people just don't have those resources.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I also wish I'd understood that sometimes clients just decide not to be bothered with it. That they just don't want to do it. They don't want to go through with it, or, and that was kind of difficult for me at first, because I'm like, well, this is something that's helping you, and it's free. Why wouldn't you want to do it? But at the same, having to accept, well, these are adults. They're adults. They get to make their own decisions, and it's their life.
Right. Yeah. And I think the thing that I knew, but I didn't understand as well before I started doing this work, was that a lot of times the legal problems that they are coming to us for help with is really a symptom or a result of other hardships or problems in their lives that aren't legal problems. And so, you know, those are problems that we can't necessarily solve for them. And, you know, sometimes those problems take priority. And, you know, it happens. And like you said, you know, they're adults and they can make their own decisions about what's going on in their lives. And sometimes there's just something else that needs their attention first. And so I try and keep that in mind. You know, nobody comes to us with just a foreclosure issue. You know, foreclosure happens because a loved one passed away, or, you know, somebody lost their job or got really sick. And so there are other, and all of those situations have a lot of different repercussions for our clients. So I think keeping that in mind and kind of remembering that we're really just a smaller part of what they're going through helps me to kind of put things in perspective. Hong, what do you wish you had known before starting pro bono work?
There are things that I didn't know immediately, but I eventually found out by asking questions. So immediately, if it would save a lot of time had I known, and certainly once I did find out, but the amount of resources that MVLS has, and when I say resources, I'm talking about people, mentors, with clients that English isn't their first language. There are language interpreter services that MVLS uses and that attorneys can use, and that's been really helpful for thinking, for example, a Vietnamese-speaking client that I had, and you probably know more about this than I do, Ellyn, but I think there's like a cost fund that can assist with costs that some clients encounter, and so that can be a resource when you know a client doesn't get that waiver, or they have some type of cost that is, you know, within the bounds of their legal what they need to do, and it's really important that they get it done. For example, like I saw an email about the deed recording costs that clients can apply for and get, and so, you know, these are things that kind of like pop up, and when you have that initial consultation with a client, it's a good resource to tell them, hey, you know, for example, okay, you want to get the fee conveyance, but hey, there's all these, you know, fees associated with it, and a lot of clients don't realize it. They kind of walk in thinking, oh, I've got this pro bono attorney, job's done. You know, I don't have to worry about it. But then it's like, oh, surprise! Wait, I have to pay for the recording fee, or I gotta order a lien certificate, and I have to have my water bill paid up before I can actually do a deed conveyance. And it's like all this stuff, and then it becomes, well, now I really don't want to go through with what I intended to do, because it's actually going to cost me more money to do it. And so,
and that usually ends up taking more time too.
Right. And you know, you sit there and you consult with them and you want to help them out, and then they realize, oh, there's all these things associated with it. So I think walking into things, it could have saved me some time if I knew, oh, all these resources are available to me. I think MVLS does a good job of letting people know these things, but I think also, you know, some of them you just have to ask, and like I was saying before, paralegals are like an awesome resource. Like, you know, and even if MVLS doesn't offer it, at least they can tell you it. So I've been able to get a lot of my questions answered just like, you know, responding back and saying, hey, is there a mentor that does landlord-tenant that I can talk to? And immediately I get a name and a number of somebody. And when I talk to that person, they're always very open and ready and willing to help.
Yeah, that's good. So the fund that you're talking about, I think you're talking about the litigation fund, and that is actually run by the Pro Bono Resource Center. So it's really, if people don't know about it, it's a fund that's renewed every year. So there's usually more money in it at the beginning of the fiscal year, which is in July every year. but you can get reimbursement for things like filing fees and like fees for recording deeds. And I think very recently they started allowing some limited fees that are associated with opening an estate. And opening an estate is a huge barrier to some of our clients who are that have foreclosure or tax sale issues, or recording a deed. Sometimes you have to open an estate before you can transfer a deed, and that can be cost prohibitive. So it is good to know about those things. And we'll have more information about resources a little bit later, but that's a really good point. If someone wants to take a case from MVLS and they have questions about what's available, all they have to do is ask. So a couple of other things that I wanted to point out. So one of the things that I don't think that I realized was that some of the clients that we serve have literacy issues, and so communicating, and especially in writing. As a lawyer, I think we use a lot of language that nobody else uses. It can be very formal and confusing to people. So I really learned to communicate with clients in a much different way, and that's been really helpful. And that's something that I've had to work on, because I guess I just didn't really realize that was something that could be an issue for our clients. So in that kind of line of thinking, so what were some of the biggest problems or issues that you guys have experienced in your pro bono cases, and how did you overcome them?
Mine, I think we talked about a little bit yesterday, was, my first divorce client is legally blind. So she can't read any of the documents that I draw up for her. She can't read anything that comes from the court or any of that. So, we had to figure out a way for her to know what she's signing. I, never want a client to sign anything that they, haven't read and they don't know exactly what it is. But, after speaking with her for a little while, she explained that she has a program on her computer that if I email her the documents in Word, it will actually read them out to her word for word. And so that was a way for us to work around, me not being able to draw these documents up in Braille. Because I have no idea, how that would work.
Huh.
So, that was, a stumbling block for, a little while. And I was just like, okay, how are we going to handle this?
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, but that's a really interesting thing. And I got to say, it's funny how, I mean, I don't know how things were handled before computers or before we had apps, but it seems like there's like an electronic resource for something. So I'm like, that's so interesting, but it's like, of course there's like an electronic way to figure that out, right?
Yeah. Technology can be a wonderful thing. Hong, what about you? What is the biggest issue that you've encountered, and how do you manage, or how did you overcome that?
So Chris touched on expectations, and I think, and Yoshika as well, I think managing expectations is very, very important, and I do it with my normal clients as well. And that conversation is very, very tricky. It's because you want to advise your client that, hey, this is how I see the case. Mm-hmm. But if you start saying things like, yeah, I kind of think this is not the strongest argument, or your odds of succeeding aren't that great, then your client starts thinking, what, you're not going to fight for me, you're not going to be a zealous advocate, or they think, oh, you don't believe me. And so it can create this tension and either it's handled or confronted ahead of time, or it kind of buries itself and grows until it just cathartically, comes out in an email out of the blue or something like that, which I've definitely I've definitely dealt with. So
yeah.
I mean, I say expectations and manage them. It's always like a very precarious, well, not always, but it can be a very precarious conversation to have. So the best way that I try and do it is just try and reassure them that, I understand that this is a pro bono case, but I don't look at it like I'm your free attorney or anything like that. I look at it like I'm your attorney, regardless if you're paying me or not. So understand that. Understand that I'm going to be advocating for you zealously, regardless of how I perceive the case. But it's also my job to make you informed about the risks and the strategies and how I see things, so that you can make an informed decision about what you want to do with the case. Because if we move forward after I tell you your offer isn't that great, and I never told you, or it wasn't clear to you that that was the case, and then everything happens and you're really unhappy and you think you lost because I wasn't a good attorney, then that's like a recipe for disaster. That's like a complaint waiting to be mailed to you. So I try and manage expectations as best I can. And other things too. I mean, just because it's a pro bono case doesn't mean that you are out all of the types of resources that you could have if you had an unlimited budget. So you just have to be smart about it. And that's what I try and tell clients as well.
Yeah.
I was going to be working on your case, but I need your help too. And so we got to work together.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think the expectations, setting expectations, like, at least for me when I was in private practice, that was definitely true with paying clients too. So, the same way that you would hopefully, that I would be sitting down with a paying client and explaining, this is what I think is possible. It's the same thing. It's not, it's really, and I've certainly had paying clients who had very unrealistic expectations about what we could accomplish. And I've had pro bono clients who had no expectations, who didn't really think that, thought maybe they were a lost cause, or there was nothing that could be done for them. And, when they learn that that's not the case, it's an amazing experience for them. So, I think it can definitely go both ways. And there a lot of these issues, especially with expectations, it's paying and not pro bono clients. So if you're already doing that with your paying clients, then you already know what you need to do with pro bono clients. So Chris, what about you? What has been the biggest hurdle for you with your pro bono clients?
I touched on communication issues earlier. I think one other time I had a client who was he was staying in a recovery center. So there are only certain times that, he didn't have a car, and there are only certain times where he could leave the facility. So fortunately, the facility is located very close to where I worked. So I would just go and meet him during the day at the facility. And, I had to do that a couple times to sign stuff or to explain things. I currently have a client who's she's not an English speaker, and she also lives pretty far away and does not have a car or know how to drive. But, fortunately, my firm is really great in providing support for pro bono cases. So the other day I had a Lyft driver come pick her up and take her transport her to for a meeting and back. And I was able to, the firm paid for an interpreter. So some of those, some of the benefits of working with a bigger firm is that, sometimes they'll have great support for pro bono stuff. Can help pick up some of those. I think Yoshika and Hong touched on some of the, the attorney's work might be pro bono, but there are other expenses the client or hurdles the client might have, which can be difficult.
Yeah. Okay, so next, I want to kind of move on from that to talk about, what do you get out of doing pro bono? What what are the benefits to you? I mean that's you know, I listed on here just, you know, personal satisfaction, professional growth, and things like that. But what does pro bono mean to you, and what have you gained from doing pro bono? Yoshika?
Well, number one, it gives me a chance to help people that I normally wouldn't get a chance, you know, to even meet or help. And a lot of times in an area of law that I've never practiced in, so I would not necessarily get that experience. And honestly, for me, a lot of times it feels better to help somebody who, you know, didn't have the resources to get the help themselves sometimes than to help someone who could easily pay for it. Because often the person that could not pay for it is far more in need of it. You know, especially with family law cases, what I've seen with the few family law cases I've done pro bono is, you know, what they're asking for are things that are necessary. You know, not wanting to fight, not wanting to just, you know, be nasty with each other, but trying to get their lives back together. Whereas, you know, often, especially with, you know, divorce cases or custody cases, it's just people, you know, fighting over money, or they're fighting because, you know, they want the child to like, you know, one parent more, or want to spite each other, and that kind of thing that you really don't see nearly as much of with pro bono family law, you know, cases. And, you know, it helps me because, you know, when you're working with people who are just, you know, being petty with each other so much, it kind of makes you feel like, I just don't know how much longer I can do this, or makes you feel jaded, or makes you feel like, you know, people just fight over nothing. But then when you represent people who really do need that kind of help, it reminds you why you do it. And that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I agree. I've had, you know, with some of the estate clients that I had in private practice, you know, they were just fighting. They were fighting so much. And at one point, you know, I had to, and this is multiple times that happened, I'd have to just kind of stop them and say, you realize that I'm getting paid out of the estate. So the more you guys all fight with each other, the less money there's going to be for all of you at the end of it. And that didn't seem to matter to them. And I've never had that experience with pro bono clients. So it's interesting that you say that, because I've had a similar experience there. Chris, what about you? What do you get out of pro bono?
Well, I think it's like Yoshika said. I think the biggest thing is, you know, helping people whose financial well-being or, you know, personal well-being, their livelihood might, or, you know, they have a lot at stake. My day-to-day practice I really like because I enjoy it, because I think it's intellectually interesting, but nobody's well-being is at stake with what I do. Whereas, you know, in the pro bono cases that I've taken, you know, people the IRS might be garnishing their wages or taking some of their Social Security, and they barely have enough to live on. Or, you know, they might have a hold on renewing their license, so they're not able to, you know, do basic things that you need an ID for, or find a job. And I also think, especially for, you know, people who are working at, you know, younger attorneys who are working at bigger firms, the pro bono cases, you know, give you an opportunity to take more responsibility. You know, you in those instances, you can take on responsibility earlier than you would if, you know, with paying clients, because, you know, there might be a partner or another senior attorney who will be taking the lead on some things. But, you know, oftentimes if you're taking on a pro bono matter, you're going to be the primary person dealing with it. So that gives you a bit of a taste of, you know, what being the, you know, of responsibility that you might not have in paying.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, you know, if you're at a firm, it can actually help you prepare to take on more responsibility with the firm. That's really interesting. Huh. Hong, what about you?
Well, it's probably going to be the same answer as Chris. I mean, let's be honest here. It's the number of underrepresented litigants in the state is astounding, and so if I can do my little part to help somebody out who really is in need, then I like to do that, because at the end of the day, there's more important things than making money and doing well for yourself. There's a lot of people who really do need a lot of help, and they can't get that, and when they are struggling to pay their rent and their food expenses and their kids, and then they have to deal with this big legal issue, I couldn't imagine being in that position. And so I think for them, getting legal representation, which is something that maybe they didn't even consider, it was even possible. I've got this attorney who's going to help me out. This is amazing. And so I think it can be a meaningful event in their life, and something that they're going to remember for the rest of their life.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I try and keep in mind too is, we're the only ones who can do this. We're the only ones who can help in these legal issues, because not everybody can practice law. Anybody who is healthy and can swing a hammer can go and help Habitat for Humanity's build a house. Not to downplay that work, because people need somewhere to live, but for legal help, only attorneys can do that. We're the only ones who can help somebody in that particular way, and so I think that's why it's so important, and that's something that keeps me, that helps me to keep doing what I'm doing, because I know that we're special. Attorneys are special. They can do things that normal people can't do, and for a lot of the clients, I think Hong, you mentioned a lot of people are unrepresented. A lot of people are unrepresented. I think especially in district court, I think over 80% of litigants that appear in district court are unrepresented. So it's a huge need. So a couple of things that I want to share, and then I'm just going to kind of start to wrap up, because we're almost at an hour here. So we actually MVLS sends out satisfaction surveys to our clients after their case is concluded. They're anonymous, so we don't know what comments connect to which attorneys, but I just wanted to share some of those with everyone, so you can have an idea of what this work means to the clients in their own words. So one of the questions that we ask is, what did receiving free legal help mean to you? And one person said, it means to me that there are people in the world that actually care enough to help you. Another person said, the world, it feels like I can make something happen in my life. And another person said, it means that it doesn't matter what mistakes you make in life, there's always somebody who will help you without judgment. And then another question that we asked is, how is your life better? And so I'm just going to read 2 or 3 responses. So one said, my life is better because I've been drug-free for 16 years and now I can live life on my terms. Another person said, the charges I had expunged were hindering my job. Now I'm able to advance my career. And another person said, just simply, better job, more money, happy wife. So I think those are really good examples of the impact that we can all have when we take these cases. And even something small like expungement, some of these comments were about expungements and removing barriers to employment. Expungements, if you remember, on average, take about 3 hours of your time, and it can just have an enormous impact for our clients. Okay, so we've talked about this, but how can someone get started? So I've listed here just a couple of things. So some of the resources that we've all mentioned during this webinar. The best way to find out about these resources are, I would say to go to our website, the MVLS website, or, just call us, call a paralegal, call our main number, and we'll get you to somebody that can talk to you. But things that we offer, and there are other organizations that offer these too, but trainings, there's like trainings like this one, online webinars, they're everywhere. We have an archive now on our website that you can go to. We also do in-person training, and I think a few people mentioned mentoring. So, you know, if you want to start taking cases and it's a new area for you, or you just don't feel comfortable. I know a few people recently started volunteering with us, and they actually don't practice law in their regular jobs. They have a degree and they're barred, but their jobs are mainly kind of law adjacent. And so they don't have regular clients, like real individuals that they're representing. So what, you know, in those cases, if they don't feel comfortable doing that, we have lots of attorneys who do that and who volunteer to work with new people to help them kind of get used to it and take the plunge, so you're not totally on your own. The other resources I just listed here, as I mentioned, the attorney resources page on our website. It doesn't just have resources to help with substantive law. It also has our volunteer handbook. It has sample representation agreements. It has all sorts of different information about the different case types that we do, and it also has case update and case closure forms so that you guys can, so that volunteers can keep us updated on what's going on in the cases. A couple other non-MVLS resources that I wanted to mention, Yoshika reminded me, People's Law Library, especially if you're new to an area of law, can be really helpful in kind of getting a general idea, but it's also, I have found, really, really helpful when you're trying to explain to a client in plain language how a legal process works, or explain to them what the law is in a certain situation. People's Law Library does that in plain language, so it's a good place to get started in that sort of when you need to do that. The other thing I listed here, PLI, is the Practicing Law Institute. They have some really great free webinars. They have some that are especially relevant here on working with pro bono populations and low-income populations. So those can be really helpful when you're getting started as well. And then lastly, of course, our staff. We're all here, our jobs exist to help our volunteer attorneys do the pro bono work that needs to be done. So we are really here for all of you. Okay, and then the last few things I wanted to point out before we sign off, there's a few upcoming trainings that we're gonna have. September 7th on estate administration. That's gonna be an in-person training at our offices, but it is also going to be a live broadcast webinar. So if you can't make it in person, you can still sign up and view it by webinar. And then September 11th and September 20th are also webinars. So one is audits of individuals and small businesses, and then September 20th is the basics of life estate deeds. So join us for those. And then just to point out, if you go, this is just a screenshot of our website. If you need to find the attorney resources page, it's under the volunteer tab on our home page. And then the thing underneath it, just to give a plug since this is still pretty new, is for our pro bono portal. So right under attorney resources, the pro bono portal. If you click on that, it's going to take you to this page. This page lists every single pro bono case that's available that MVLS has. All of our cases are up here, and it's updated in real time. So as soon as the case becomes available, the summary is going to be on this page. And if you look, you can see that you can search it by case type and by county. So if you know you only have, you can't really travel, you just really want to take a case where you are, and I'm in Baltimore City, I can narrow it down by Baltimore City, and if I know I just want to do an estate, I can click on estates, and it'll just show me estate cases that are in Baltimore City. And once the case is placed with the volunteer, it immediately is going to come down from the website. So you're not going to have to worry about, you know, that a case is already taken or that it's old and stale. This is an up-to-date, real-time listing of our cases. Okay, and then just following us on social media. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today and just ask if our panelists have any parting thoughts or parting wisdom they want to give before we sign off.
I would just say, for anyone considering starting pro bono, go and check out the YouTube channel that MVLS has. There are tons of like little short clips, you know, people talking about, you know, serving the pro bono community and that kind of thing, and also, you know, full-length training videos. So it's definitely a really, really great resource to go to that YouTube channel. It's awesome.
Thanks. Chris or Han?
I think, you know, expungement's a great way to get started. Ellyn, you noted that you know, some of the comments you got were on expungement cases, and those are pretty simple, especially within an expungement clinic, because you'll have, you know, the support of people around you. Yeah, those really make a huge impact, and it's a very easy way to get started.
If you're on the fence or haven't done pro bono, just do it. It's not going to hurt you. You can take a small case, and don't forget that MVLS actually provides malpractice insurance, so you're covered in the event that you want to take a case. So just do it, try it out. You'll be surprised by how soon you want to take another case.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us and sharing your story. It's been really great, and I hope that everyone who listens to this is listening to this now or in the future, that this encourages you to get involved with pro bono. And like I said, you know, call us, go to our website just to get started, and hopefully we will be able to help you start your journey. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.